It's episode 119 of the Author Stories podcast. I'm your host, Hank Garner. Boy, I've got a lot of news to tell you about this week, so let's just jump right in. Starting this week, this Friday, we'll be starting a second show of every week. That's right, on Fridays, I'm going to bring you the Author Stories Writers Workshop, where I have a couple of writers on with me, and we deconstruct and kind of reverse engineer one of their stories. And a lot of hilarity ensues, and hopefully a lot of great nuggets of wisdom and writing advice coming from these writers. So be sure to tune in each Friday for the Writers Workshop podcast coming to you from the Author Stories podcast. I've got some new sponsors this week I'd like to tell you about. The first one is Swan's Night Sun by John C. Wright. John C. Wright is one of the living grandmasters of science fiction and won the 2016 Dragon Award for Best Science Fiction Novel at Dragon Con. Some readers said this book was thoroughly entertaining, a YA novel for all ages who enjoy imaginative urban fantasy. It's Swan Night Sun by John C. Wright. Also, The Unexpected Enlightenment of Rachel Griffin by Jaji Lamplighter. This book's about a magical girl detective. It's YA at its absolute best. One reader said it's like Fringe meets Narnia at Hogwarts, like Harry Potter, but better. So go check these out. There's links to these books in the show notes. Also, I'd like to thank Ellen Campbell for sponsoring the show. Ellen is an editor extraordinaire. If you are a writer and are looking for someone to help you make your writing the best it can be, go visit ellencampbell.thirdscribe.com. There you can find all of the clients that Ellen has worked with, and I guarantee you will find many books that you recognize that Ellen has had a hand in behind the scenes. So if you need help with your manuscript, contact Ellen Campbell at ellencampbell.thirdscribe.com. Also, I'd like to thank Tom Freer for sponsoring the show this week. He's got a couple of books I'd like to point you toward. The first one is called Tom. It's a lighthearted and gently satirical fantasy that tells the story of a cat that is turned into a human. It's a fascinating story. I picked it up myself. I hope you will. And also Changeling's Island by Dave Freer. This book was shortlisted for the Dragon Award for Best Fantasy, along with Larry Correia and Jim Butcher, and for Best YA Book. Changeling's Island is a coming-of-age story full of magic, mystery, and creatures of all sorts. I hope you'll go pick up a copy of it. I did, of each one of these, and please let our sponsors know that you appreciate what they do and allow us to keep bringing you great content each week. So please pick up a copy of these fantastic books and let them know that you appreciate it. Be sure to tune in later this week for the second Author Stories podcast coming to you on Friday. And if you go to hankgarner.com, you can find all of the archives of the show. You can subscribe on iTunes, on Google Play, at Stitcher Radio, on YouTube. Anywhere that you listen to podcasts, you can find the Author Stories podcast. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for each of you tuning in and listening each week. I've got lots and lots of new content coming to you, more interviews with the authors that you want to hear. Thanks for listening. Now on to my fantastic interview with Joe Hart. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm very excited on this rather auspicious day. Today that we're recording this is the 2-year anniversary of the very first episode of Author Stories, and that episode was with Jason Gurley, who published Eleanor when we first talked to him, and has since been republished with Crown Publishing, and we had a follow-up show with Jason for this. So go back and listen to episode 1 when you get a chance. But today I'm super excited to have Joe Hart on the show with me. Joe has a book out. Well, he's got several new releases this year. A new one coming up a week after this releases, and we're going to get into all that in just a minute. But welcome to the show, Joe.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Hank. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, glad to have you on. I start each show with the same question or a variation of it, and that is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a storyteller?
Oh, yeah. Probably goes back to I was pretty young. I started writing my first stories when I was probably about nine or 10, right in that area. My mom had an old electric typewriter, so it had the little ribbon in there and everything, and I was just fell in love with that thing, how it worked and the sounds it made and everything. So I started plunking away on that, and I think it was there. I'd read quite a bit of short stories, and I'd fallen in love with kind of the horror genre, and even that young, because I usually say I kind of blame it on my sister where I ended up today, because she's 10 years older than me, and she loved Stephen King and Dean Koontz and all the greats, and so those books were in the house when I was young, and she left for college and left quite a few of them laying around while I picked a few up, and I was just transported, So I think that's the first memory is reading some of these, Stephen King's short stories and, R.L. Stein, Goosebumps, and
oh yeah,
Dean Koontz and all these great stories. And I just sat down at the typewriter and I thought I want to write some of my own. I think I can do this. So started plunking away on the keys and just haven't quit since. So yeah,
I love it. Tell me about that typewriter that your mom had. That's something very near and dear to my heart. My book Writer's Block is about a writer who finds an old IBM Selectric in a yard sale that happens to be magic. He doesn't know that, but what he types on it comes true. And one of the things when I was writing that story was remembering back. For me, it was high school typing class when there still was a thing as typing class. Yeah. And we had these IBM Selectrics, and you would put your fingers on the home row keys and switch the thing on, and the vibration in it. There's a very visceral experience to writing. Did you write anything on that typewriter?
Yeah, that's kind of where I definitely first started. I got probably, I would say, a dozen short stories on that thing before I graduated, because same thing. I was those home row keys and the typing class, very
right.
Very familiar. Yeah. When we finally got to the point in kind of grade school when they kind of let us out kind of freewheeling, so to speak, as far as creating some stories and things like that, and we would have computer hour.
Right.
That's kind of where the transition was made. But yeah, that turning that old electronic typewriter on, and it took sometimes 30 seconds for it to get fully started up, and the thing would go back and forth. Yeah. So yeah, it definitely added that other layer to writing, and it was very fun. It's something that I see some of these new the gadgets that you can kind of have the old typewriter base, and then it has the digital screen above it. I've seen those marketed and stuff. That's kind of interesting to me, because I do like you said, that visceral feel of the keys snapping down, and that's a lot of fun. So
yeah, there's just something different about it. I don't know what some people get that same feeling by drafting out a story like on legal pads or something. There's something very different about being absolutely disconnected from all the distractions, and maybe that's part of what it is. When you're typing on a computer, there's always the threat of a Facebook notification or something, dinging in the background, and I think it's so difficult for us to turn all that stuff off. Maybe that's part of the allure. I don't know.
I think so. I think it's because you're right. I mean, if you have a screen in front of you, it's different than a page. The screen, like you say, you can do so many more things. You can go so many more places with a computer, whereas a typewriter, or even the comparative a paperback book to a Kindle, things like that. Right. It's you and the words and the page, and it's different. So I know what you're saying. The writing longhand, and it's a different feeling. So yeah,
it is. When you were in elementary school, and you said that you got computer time and started encouraging writing, was there ever a teacher or someone in your life that recognized that maybe there was a spark of something there with you and encouraged you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have a great story. I'm super proud of it. My high school English teacher, I had Mr. Brown, Lauren Brown is his name. I started, with him probably 7th or 8th grade. I think was my first English classes. And the guy was he was like a force of nature in the classroom. Probably one of the best teachers I've ever had in my life. And he, took that love of writing that was instilled in me from all my, the reading that I'd done and the dabbling that I'd done with writing. And I think he saw something because he took it upon himself to create kind of a separate program for creative writing. As actually we got older, it was one of my best friends and I were the only 2 kids in the class. We went to a very small school, but at the same time, there was quite a few other kids that were interested in writing. We were the only 2 that got chosen to kind of partake in this gifted and talented class. So it was a really, really neat experience. So for about 2.5 years there, we would have an hour every day where we would just get turned loose down to the computer lab and work on a project. And we would have kind of a final project due at the end of each quarter or semester, whichever it was. And it would be totally on our own. We would kind of just pass it by Mr. Brown and say, well, I'm going to write a novella. I'm going to write 4 short stories by the end of the quarter and whatnot. And he would just let us go. But he was extremely supportive. And unfortunately he passed away here several years back. But I definitely credit him to a major proponent of where I am today, because he was always so supportive and just had tons of insight. And he was a writer himself. He had written plays and different things like that, and partaken in stage plays and things like that. So very creative guy and just a wonderful, wonderful teacher. So he's definitely one of the main people that influenced me. Yeah.
Love that. I have a very similar story. I had an 11th grade English teacher, excuse me, Celia Harper, who was very, very similar in that same way. I think, there are these people that we encounter in life and they don't see fame and stardom, but man, they are what really have encouraged so many of us. She would slip me books and she would be like, I've got this book I think you would enjoy. Then she'd say, no, I don't think you're ready for it yet. And then I'd be like, no, you got
you can't do that.
You can't. Oh man, it was, just really, fan the flames. It was amazing. So your sister goes off to college. She's 10 years older than you, and she leaves her stash of horror and thriller books. Do you remember what that first one was that you read that opened your eyes?
I think the first one that really affected me was It by Stephen King. I think that was one of the first things I read by him. And
that's a great starter.
It's a great starter. I'm pretty sure my mother would, she would fly off the handle if she knew exactly how young I was when I read that. I think I was 10 or 11, right in that area. I read It, which is funny. Looking at now, I have a 13-year-old daughter, and I would never let her read it right now. I feel like that's right. That's pretty progressive stuff. But
right.
I remember reading that, and I kind of go back to that sometimes, thinking about it being one of my, the influential works, and very interesting because as far as it's just a sprawling epic story, with this, the kind of the cosmic horror and the small town mixed together. And then I think what really appealed to me most was it's one of the best coming of age stories, I think of the generations here past. It was just so seminal in that regards, to have these characters grow up together in this 50s 60s era. It's an era that of course I was born in the 80s, but it was just, you could see so many similarities in that construct that he used with the characters, and how well he remembered his childhood. It just really came across to me, and I thought, these kids, if 20, 30 years difference is, I think that would fall away if these characters were kids that lived down the street from me, or if I lived in this small town in Derry. So I thought that was just it just really transported me with those characters. And I think that's something that's, hung with me still today as far as, creation wise, as far as characters and whatnot. So yeah, it was very influential work for sure.
What part of the country did you grow up in?
I've lived in Minnesota, kind of northern Minnesota, my whole life. Okay. So I'm about 3 hours north of Minneapolis. So I'm way up in the north woods here. So
small town.
Yeah. It's a small town. We're 12,000 people in my town, and
okay.
Yeah, but very quaint. It's kind of a touristy town for people coming up from the cities there, and but very, very, very nice neighborhoods and yeah, just a beautiful place to grow up.
Right. I'm from the very deep South, but a similar kind of setting, small town, quaint, lots of people pass through, but nobody stays, that kind of thing. Do you feel like place and where we're from has a big impact on the stories we decide to tell?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely. I mean, when I started off writing my first few novels, all were set in Minnesota. Just because, everyone says, write what you know. And I did find that, that rule applies and it doesn't apply sometimes. But I felt like it definitely applied as far as setting. I thought, well, it's, I haven't been to a lot of places. Up until the last few years, I hadn't traveled very much. So I was, much more acquainted with the woods and, the Mississippi River and these, little puddles and lakes that surround us and the swamps and these tiny little towns. Those are my background, for my stories and whatnot. So I think definitely it influenced me greatly when I first started writing out. Kind of gave me my stage to step up on there as far as setting. So, like I said, the coming of age type thing, the connections that characters have that grew up in a small town and how everybody knows everybody, I think is very important to story a lot of times if you're writing that type of novel. So yeah, definitely.
There's something magical, for lack of a better word, about some of these places. All of my stories are set in Mississippi, at the other end of the Mississippi River.
Sure.
Same body of water 1,000 miles south. But there's something about people that connect with that dirt and that water that passes through. That's I don't know what it is, but that's intriguing to hear other people say that.
Yeah.
For sure. And there's I love hearing that people write about their part of the world, because I think a lot like you, most of us don't travel the world constantly, and getting to see those places through other people's eyes is a real treat. So I love hearing people say that. When did you decide that you were going to tackle a major piece of fiction? And when did you decide, I think this is something that I want to do with my life?
Sure. I had it in my head from late high school, early college that I wanted to be a writer. What kind of held me back to really pursue it and push forward was I went in and researched. It was probably the first part of college when I kind of figured out what I wanted to do, because I was taking these classes in college, and I just soaked up all the English and literature classes that I could. I mean, I think in the first couple of years I was in college, I took all the required classes as far as the English side of things, creative writing, and all the different genres of literature. And I kind of got to the point where I said, okay, I want to be a writer. And I went and met with my guidance counselor and he said, well, you can be a teacher with the direction you're going. And I said, well, I kind of want to be a writer. He says, well, you can be a journalist. And I said, okay. I mean, I think you kept kind of missing the point, but it was, I didn't want to be a teacher. I didn't want to be a journalist. I wanted to be a fiction writer. And there was no path, that he could tell me and say, okay, well, in 4 years, here you go. You'll have your degree and you'll be a fiction writer. Well, there is no such thing. So when I looked into exactly how to become a published writer, it was so daunting. I looked at it and I thought, okay, I have to get an agent. And it seemed very scary to me to talk to these people from New York or Los Angeles that would want to represent your work, especially being a young guy, 20, 21 years old. And I just kind of sat there and looked at this and I thought, oh my God, how am I ever going to be able to do this? I don't, I'm just from this tiny little town from northern Minnesota, and I don't know how to do this. So it kind of held me back a little bit in that instance. It set me back on my heels a little bit, and I thought, well, I don't even know if I'm good enough yet to be published. And so it held me back for a while, actually, in college. I continued to write, but it wasn't as seriously as I should have probably been taking it, because I kind of felt like, well, maybe this isn't the path for me, or I'm not sure about the path. And so I think, I wrote several short stories and a lot of poems, a lot of poetry, and wrote a couple novellas in college. But then probably the first major work that I sat down and just focused my sights on was a screenplay. It was years later. It was a few years after, college and whatnot. And I finally sat down and I said, okay, I need to get serious if I want to do this, because I'd been working a bunch of different jobs and nothing was really my passion. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be a writer. And I had this idea, and I thought this fits so well to the screen. So I said, okay, I'm going to research how to write a screenplay. So I did, and sat down and wrote the thing. I mean, I tell some people this, and the people that are in industry, and especially nowadays, I sat down and I wrote the screenplay in Word without any of the templates or anything like that, as far as formatting.
Oh, bless your heart.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you know, I mean, there's some great script writing software nowadays that is, yeah. I've used it, in the last several years, when I've written some different things for the screen. And it is just an absolute amazing breeze compared to that first. I mean, I bet I spent half to 3/4 of my time not even just writing the story. I was formatting the page. Oh my God, So, so I did that. And I had a contact in New York who was willing to hand it off to some people out there, and it got passed around for a while. Nothing really ever came of it, but that was probably the first thing I really tackled, which was, I think it was a good thing, because screenwriting is hard in different angles. It can be harder than writing a novel or a short story, just for like you say, that form and how tight and lean everything has to be. You don't have a lot of room to describe things. It's all got to be seen through the viewer's eyes, and you have to make it come across through dialogue and action. That's it. So I think it did benefit me in the long run doing that first, even though it was kind of soul crushing at times. So that was the first thing that I really kind of pursued. Yeah.
What did you do with that?
Like I said, it got sent out to New York, and nothing really came of it. But I kept my copy. I had it all copyrighted and everything, and I just set it in the desk, and it's sitting there. And someday I might kind of take it out and tinker with it again. It's definitely the earliest thing that I did, and I'm sure it would make my eyes roll back in my head to read it today. But it was a lot of fun to write, because it was just a ton of action. It was some espionage and some black ops type thing that I was really interested in at the time. Definitely like a Vince Flynn type thriller. Lots of fun. And, and I even considered here in the last couple of years, looking at different projects, I looked at novelizing it, and that might be an option someday. So
Nice.
It's sitting there waiting to be done with something. So, yeah.
We'll look for that. What did you learn? What was the best lesson that you learned from completely shifting gears and writing a screenplay? I know you said that you had to, everything has to be shown through dialogue and action. But what did you take away from that said, you know what, after doing this, I know I'm a better writer now?
Sure. That was a big part of it, that just the leanness of the prose and whatnot. It was that fact that you had to get a character across just by what they said and what they did. And you had to think of it in the form of an actor performing these motions on the screen in front of a camera, rather than, well, here's my character. I can have him do absolutely anything that I want in the novel, and I can describe it, take, a lengthy paragraph to describe how that person was feeling, or, the little nuances that are, left out or lost sometimes in screenwriting. But I think that definitely strengthened my overall writing process, because it ingrained that sense of character to me. It meant like, character comes across, not only by what they're thinking, but definitely what they do and say. And I think that's a very powerful, way to write as far as characterization goes. So, yeah.
Sure. Where did you go from there after writing that screenplay?
It wasn't a short time later that Kindle became available, and I kind of hit my radar. I think it was my wife got me, I think it was a second generation Kindle, and I started looking at this, and I'm like, wow, they have an option to publish on here. And I did a double take, and I sat there and looked at it, and I thought, well, there must be some standard here where I'd have to know somebody, or I have to apply or something. Well, I start looking, and this is a platform for any writer, anybody that has a story to tell, that they can publish. And that just blew me away. And it was a little intimidating. I thought, wow, this could, I have some stories, I have some ideas, I have some material down already, I could publish. And it was a total 180 of what I felt in college when I, thought that there was no chance of me landing an agent or, going forward with the traditional publishing career. And it was very exciting. And so I just sat down and I started penning these short stories, these short horror stories that had been rolling around in my head for years. And, I got 10 stories together and got them professionally edited and bought a cover. And I just, I really learned a lot from, Joe Conrath was one of the first, guys that I started reading up on. When, you type in self-publishing, that's his website comes up. And
you're right.
So,
as did a whole lot of us.
Yes, exactly. I think there's a whole generation there that's that he helped out, and I have to say, the guy was, he was right on the money as far as, and especially that time period, when a lot of people were getting into publishing through Kindle and whatnot. So, took a lot of hints there and went forward and released. I think my first collection, the short stories, was I think 2011. I think that first came out. So.
Was that Midnight Paths?
Yes, it was. Yep. So.
And what was that experience like for you to put that together and then release it? Was it kind of surreal to have your stuff up where people could purchase it?
I mean, it was terrifying. I mean, I sat there and I was so excited about it. And then I finally got to the point where I was hitting the publish button, and, I think my wife had to kind of steady me there a little bit, because I was sitting there going, okay, there's a lot of people that could potentially read this. I didn't expect a huge readership, definitely, not at first for sure, but I felt like, wow, this is the next step forward. People, and that's, you talk about gatekeepers and getting into the business and things. I mean, readers are the ultimate gatekeepers. They, if they don't like something that you're doing, they'll let you know. Reader reviews and everything, all the feedback. So it was intimidating, but it was so exciting. And when the book started selling some copies and some reviews started coming in, it was just like an addiction. It was fantastic. I was just raring to go on the next project. So
yeah, Amazon was most definitely probably the most responsible for the democratization of publishing, but also criticism. The other side of that is you're immediately open for criticism for people to start. And I know that's the scary part of publishing is, man, as soon as this is up there, everybody and their brother is going to be able to let loose on what they think of my writing. but I think you got over that pretty quickly, didn't you?
Yeah, it was. Again, listening to some of the writers, that especially Joe Conrath had on his blog, and different influential people that I was reading at the time. I read quite a few essays by Barry Eisler, and really funny, incidentally. Years later, now I'm represented by his wife, who is my agent. So it's very strange, this full circle type thing. But yeah, great. reading a lot of his blog posts, and Blake Crouch was one of the first authors that I got introduced to through Joe's website there, and he's been he was a huge influence on my work, as I started publishing more and whatnot. And then, now I have the great fortune to be, he blurbed several of my books, and, looking forward to seeing him at the next convention that we go to, great guy,
he's a fantastic
guy. So it's just I think that was the most surreal part of it is seeing all the success and the different people that I looked up to and read and admired, and then, coming into contact with them, literally sitting down at a table across from them and having a great conversation with them. So I think that was the huge surreal part for me, as far as the writing and publishing stuff went. So, yeah.
So the first thing you published was a collection of horror short stories.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yep.
How long did it take you to put that together when you kind of realized that this was a thing and that there was a platform to use?
Boy, it wasn't too long, because I was working, it was basically two jobs at the time. I was managing and personal training at a gym, and I would work anywhere between 50 and 60 hours a week for that. And I had my sights on this, and I sat down on the weekends and I set a goal for myself. I would write for an hour every night when I got home. Sometimes I wouldn't get home until 8 or 9 o'clock at night, but I would sit and knock out at least, try to get between 700 and 1,000 words a night. And so it didn't take too long. I had all these stories kind of culminating in the back of my mind, and that's what I would do at work. If I had a little downtime or I was on my break, I would just mull everything over. And it was probably only a couple months before I had all the, the rough stories outlined, and before we started the editing process. So it was only a matter of, probably 3-4 months before I was able to put the collection out. So yeah, it was pretty quick.
And, writers really rarely lack for ideas. People ask all the time, like, where do story ideas come from and that sort of thing. Well, they're all around you. All you have to do is open your eyes, and they're a cast of characters literally all around. And I know a lot of storytellers are, constantly mulling over scenarios in their mind. I wonder what would happen if this person did this all of a sudden. Yeah. It's really it's not for lack of ideas. It's for lack of persistence. Like you said, it's that 700 to 1,000 words a day, which, if you're a serious writer, doesn't seem like much at all. But if you're consistent, man, that piles up really quickly.
Definitely. Yeah, exactly. And that's, quite a few authors have approached me, that are, I won't say aspiring. I don't really like that word, because if you write, you're a writer, whether you're published or not. So,
that's right.
So these, the writers that have come to me and they're yet to be published, or they have a book out, or they're struggling, that type of thing. That's what should I do, or what's the main thing I should focus on? And that's what I always say. I just say persistence, sitting down, getting the work done. If you can get the words on the page, then you have something to work with, and it can always be fixed. Someone can give you their opinion. You have a professional editor, you have beta readers, all these inputs from outside can be, unified into your story. You can take those, and use the opinions, but you got to get it down first. You have to sit down and write the words. So yeah, definitely important.
Yeah. If you don't put your butt in the chair, none of the other stuff happens.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Why was horror your go-to for the first thing that you published?
I would say it stemmed definitely from, childhood, and what I fell in love with is the genre itself, from that young reading experience. I love that feeling of being scared, that shock value, one of the strongest memories is reading The Shining, and when he goes into the room, I'm losing the number here, and the woman is in the bathtub, and
Right.
and I literally was like jolted holding the book. I'm reading the paperback, and I was literally jolted, and I thought, wow, that is an unbelievable reaction. I realized it even then. I think it was like 12 years old, and I was like, that is, to have a kind of reaction just reading something. It's not a movie. It's not a TV show. Someone didn't literally jump out at you from a closed closet or something, To have that reaction to reading words on a page, I thought, wow, I want to do this. That I think that was one of the first instances where I thought, I want to be able to have that power and that reaction over people that read my work. And I felt like, horror just really appealed to me that way, that it was such a great vehicle for getting across character stories, these insane situations that these, a lot of times, just very average, everyday people got themselves into, or things happened to, really appealed to me. And I thought, this is just a fantastic way to tell a great story and, scare the hell out of people doing it, so that's right. That's kind of where it came from. Yeah.
What do you think it is about us as readers that crave those kinds of stories? There's something about, I don't know. I've pondered this quite a lot lately, and I'm trying to sort it out for myself. But there's something about going through the mundane machinations of life that kind of preclude us from seeing all of the weird, sometimes horrific, sometimes horrible, sometimes really bizarre things that are going on all around us that we just don't see. And horror and thriller and, some of those genres that the lines kind of blur. But do you think that there's something about us getting kind of outside of our typical little comfort zones to see things that we might not otherwise see?
Yeah. I think that's a huge part of it. I think you kind of nailed it there as far as, I think human beings are kind of like odd that way. Like you say, if something, really mundane and ordinary and things like that, that's good. That's great, really. Yeah. If you look at, my life's so boring. That's great. Really in the long run, you're going to live probably a pretty happy life. You're going to be healthy, happy, things are going to go well for you.
Right. Yeah. From a preservation standpoint.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Good.
But, we thrive on that too. I think it goes way back to, when we were, coming out of the jungle, it's that fight or flight. It's that, going back to the visceral feeling of being in danger, that fear and excitement and the adrenaline rush and all those things that come with, kind of from that primordial part of our brains. I think that it's gotten turned down, like the volume on our radio, it's gotten turned down over all these years, to the present point. And I think there's a part of us that still craves that. It still craves the danger and a little bit of the fear and the anxiousness and the thrills that we get from a precarious or dangerous situation. I think that's what we seek. And it's what's nice is now you can, live all these stories and these fantastic situations from the comfort of your chair. You don't have to go fight a saber-toothed tiger. You don't have to, actually be on an FBI team that's investigating a serial killer. You can do it from the comfort of your living room, and it's a safe fear. I think someone described Jaws as that. It's a safe fear because if you don't go in the water, Jaws can't get you. The shark right. Can't get you. It's that same thing blown up on a bigger scale with all fiction. I think you get transported, and it's that safe, especially horror and thriller. It's that safe kind of fear. You can always shut the book and take a break and walk away from it. and rather than real life. So, yeah.
Yeah. As writers, as horror and thriller and these genres that are akin to one another become more popular, and they're hugely popular. But as we have more people writing in the genre, as we have more books coming out, does it get harder and harder to scare the audience? And how do you keep the storytelling fresh without there's always is the law of diminishing returns, and what scared someone once may not scare them again. How do we keep tight storytelling, clever storytelling, without just going too gross and without getting cheap with our writing? Does that make sense
definitely.
At all?
Yep. Yeah, and I think the separation partially there is, like you said, the kind of the gross out and the the blood and the gore, that type of thing. And I think some horror writers, there's definitely some horror writers where they set out, and that's what they set out to do. They set out to write a very gory, kind of blood-drenched scare fest that way. They set out to do that.
Right.
Maybe that's their passion. To they love Friday the 13th and these different things where a lot of this stuff stemmed from.
But that becomes caricature really quickly.
It does, and and I think it's personal taste a lot. I'm okay with gore. There is gore in a lot of my books. There is, but it's sprinkled in at the right moments where I feel like it has the most hard hitting. When it comes from left field and just slams into you, that's when I think that a little bit of gore makes the most of its usage there. Some of the scariest scenes I've ever read or written have been bloodless. They've been unsettling, disturbing, where you sit there and that chill creeps across you and you get goosebumps and you go, ooh, that was creepy. I'm much more into the creepy, unsettling, disturbing realm of the horror side and thrillers, than anything with too much, kind of gross out stuff. So, I think the way to do it is, I was talking with my wife the other day about, just even ghost stories in general. Some of the most effective ghost stories, they have familiar things showing up in unfamiliar places. And that's always really appealed to me. I looked at things and there's nothing creepier than, say, a man, loses his wife to a tragic traffic accident, and he loses her wedding ring somehow, and he moves on in his life, and he moves out of the state, and he moves to a new house, and somehow in that house he finds his wife's wedding ring. That would be to me very unsettling and disturbing. I think I definitely err more on that side of the genre, and I think that's characters are another thing I think that keeps it very close to home, and can be, when you really truly feel for a character or relate to them, I think that's one of the most effective things too, because you don't want something bad to happen to them, and even when it does, you hope they come back from it, so yeah, definitely.
Right. Well, to me, the gore and the gross out stuff is best sprinkled. It's kind of like using harsh language. Like if you use the F word a lot, if you begin a book and a character is just dropping that word, every sentence, you get pretty desensitized really quickly. And then when that character needs to really emote, you don't have that tool anymore. You've taken that away. And to me, gore is kind of like that. Boy, it's best used when it's a real shock. Anyway. So tell us a little bit about your latest series that you've got out. The Last Girl has become hugely popular on Amazon, and I know you have a sequel to it coming up quickly. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, next week I believe it comes out. Right now, you are ranked on Amazon in the top 50 in science fiction, action, adventure, horror, mystery. People are really connecting with your work. Tell us a little bit about this latest series and how we can get into it.
Sure. The premise came to me for The Last Girl. I was just kind of, I think I'd read a couple of different articles about, kind of this just a overbearance of, misogyny and different things that were happening in the world, with this, sexism and things like that. And I just, the thought came through my head. I thought, what if women weren't born anymore? What if there was very, very, very few women born? What if it happened over a short period of time, several years, that the birth rate just declines precipitously? I thought, what would happen? What would happen to the world? And it just went from there. A lot of my ideas do. It's the what if thing, and I'm sure most authors do that. You sit there and you go, what if this happened? So I posed the question to my wife. I said, just a premise. I said, if women pretty much being born, if there was less than 1% on Earth, would they treated, like queens or like slaves? And she didn't even miss a beat. She said slaves. They'd be treated like slaves.
Wow.
And I posed it to quite a few women in my life, and they all came back with that same, that same reaction. So I thought, okay. And it's the road I was going down anyways. So, the story is about a young woman. She's been held at this research facility since before she could remember. She doesn't know her last name. Her first name's Zoe, and there's about 6 or 7 other women in there with her of varying ages, and they are, not mistreated in this compound that they're staying in, but it's very strict. It's a very structured environment. They are fed propaganda about the outside world and what's happened, and a very picture. It's a picture painted for them by the people in charge, and there's basically kind of a program coming up on her horizon. When all the women turn 21, they get inducted, and they go to kind of a waiting area, and then they're reunited with their families in a safe haven, because this virus that created this dearth of female births, they've created this safe place for them. Well, Zoe isn't buying it. Basically, he thinks that there's something terrible because she's never seen any of these women again once they go into this program. So that's kind of where we meet her. She's on the final days of her captivity, basically, and she wants to get out. So that's kind of where our jumping off point, anyways. So yeah.
And it's called the Dominion trilogy. What's that name about?
Dominion. It has a bunch of different meanings throughout the trilogy as it goes along. But it's this kind of the whole idea of this control and an area of either geographically or mentally, psychologically. It's having control over someone or something, and that's kind of that basic idea is where it came to me as far as the premise was. If women weren't being born anymore, would they be controlled? And what we do, I feel like as a species, whenever we have something either that goes wrong or goes right, or it doesn't matter, we try to control it. We're a very controlling species. That's why we're in the position we're in. Right. So I felt like the Dominion, that word held a lot of power overall throughout the books. It definitely was, full of choices, and the different characters, what they wanted and what they got, and this kind of control factor always in the background, whether they had control over their situation or whether they didn't and someone else had control over them. So that's kind of where the term came from. So, yeah.
Book 2 comes out September 13th. It's called The Final Trade. When do you plan to have book 3?
Book 3 is in editing right now.
Wow,
yeah,
nice.
It's done. It's in the editing phases. As far as I know, it'll be kind of early next year, like March-ish, somewhere in there. So, yeah.
Nice, nice. You also released The Night is Deep, the book 2 of the Liam Dempsey thriller series just a couple months ago. So you've got 2 series running concurrently?
Yeah. It was kind of funny because I had kind of written that second book kind of at the beginning of my partnership, basically, with Thomas Mercer, who was my publisher for my books for the last quite a few books here, which is, an Amazon publishing arm. And so I had written that one in the meantime and then had this idea for the last girl in this trilogy. And my editor, really wanted me to run with this trilogy. And so I kind of set this, the second book in my thriller series aside. It was about 95% done. And I set that on the side burner and then took up the trilogy. And in the meantime, then when I had a gap between books, then I finished the second book in the Liam Dempsey series there. And so it was, it was kind of a cascade event there where I had 2 or 3 or 4 books going at the same time. And now, they're just coming out in a quick succession. It was all kind of worked out for timing this year. So, yeah.
Awesome. You mentioned, I'll only bring this up because you mentioned it. Your books are published by Thomas Mercer, and who, as you said, are a Amazon-owned subsidiary. How has that relationship been for you, and did they find you because of the success you'd had through self-publishing on Amazon?
Yeah, it actually was. It was, I had released The River is Dark. It was my first kind of standalone traditional thriller. In a sense, I didn't have any supernatural entities or forces or overtones in it at all. And I think it actually, a little plug for BookBub here. I had run a BookBub promotion, 99-cent promotion on it. And I think that's where my acquisitions editor, she saw it while it was doing well on the charts there. It ran up into the top 100 and was sitting there. And so she reached out to me and she said, I read the book. I loved it. I think, maybe there could be a partnership here with Thomas Mercer. We could, get a lot more readers for you. And we, I really taken with the book. And so that's kind of how that started. And yeah, it's been fantastic experience. I can't just sing, Thomas and Mercer's praises enough. Everybody there on the team is very passionate. They love books. They care about authors. They go above and beyond to make you feel like you're part of something. You're part of a family that they really have that close knit friendships and relatability in the workplace there. I had the good fortune to go out in there and got a tour of the offices and got to meet everyone face to face that I'd been going back and forth with over the phone and email and everything. So, no, they've been a fantastic publisher. I can't say enough good things. So, yeah.
That's fantastic to hear. Joe, before we go, if there's a person out there who is who's wanting to get started, or maybe they're stuck in their kind of writing and publishing journey, is there one piece of advice that you would give someone? Like you, I hate the word or the term aspiring author or aspiring writer. You either write or you don't. But we're all at different places in our journey. And being in the position you are and having the success that you've had and the connection with readers that you've had, is there something that you would tell other writers?
Yeah, a couple things. The first piece, like I said, is persistence. If you really want to do this job, persistence, sitting down and writing the words, being passionate about what you're writing. I wouldn't suggest writing just to the market. I would say find what you're truly interested in, find the stories and the characters that you can fall in love with and spend months and months with them at a time. Because that's going to shine through in your writing. I would say, find a very good editor, find people you can trust that are willing to give you feedback and read for you. And yeah, just move forward in the direction that you feel is going to suit your career the best. There's some people that really, really want a ton of control, and they want to be involved in every part of the publishing process and have kind of some aspect of control. Well, self-publishing is probably a really good avenue for you. And otherwise, there's some people that say, I just want to write. I don't want to deal as much on the publishing side and worry about cover design and worry about editing and these different things. And then more of a traditional route might be for you. That would be the kind of the split in the road there. And there's some people like me. I'm definitely a hybrid. I right now a lot of my books are coming out through Thomas and Mercer. It's not to say that in the future I won't self-publish again. And I think it's a great time for that, to have those choices for writers in general. You have options now. There's not a single road to publishing anymore. It's any way that fits, you and your personality. So I think those are the main things. Be passionate about what you do and be in love with it, and keep doing it, and you'll get somewhere. You will. It definitely is possible. So.
I couldn't agree more. I don't even like to get into the discussions or arguments anymore about self-publishing versus traditional publishing, because that paradigm is gone. I mean, that's the authors actually have choices now, and I think, like you, being a hybrid published author is it's all you could ask for at this point. It's the best scenario you could ask for, and authors actually have those choices now. Joe, this has been a great joy to have you on the show this week. I'm a big fan of your writing, and thank you for taking time to come on the show.
Oh, I appreciate it.
Where can people find you online so that they can connect with you and follow everything that's coming out?
Sure. I do a lot of my announcements and different things on Facebook and Twitter. So they can definitely find me there, at author Joe Hart on Twitter. Otherwise, my website, I put a lot of the different things, upcoming announcements and releases and stuff on my website. It's joehartbooks.com. And they can find me there. So
excellent. Thank you so much for taking time to come on the show.
I appreciate it. Thank you, man.